What's up, booktube? Welcome back. My name is Laura if you're new here, and today I'm wrapping up my July reading month. So July was a little bit rocky. I completely failed my Operation TBR. I only actually read and finished one book off of it out of 4. 2 of them I DNF'd and one of them I didn't even start. So it was really not a great reading month for me whatsoever. I did manage to read quite a few books, but 3 of them were literally in the span of 2 days. So, and they were right at the end of the month. So the first 3 weeks of the month were awful. I did not get much reading done. I was trying to read and I was doing really well, but I think the problem was I was reading 2 very chunky books at the same time, and one of them was the DNF, and it just kind of put me in a weird kind of reading slump where I just was not really in the mood to touch anything, but I also wanted to read everything all at once. It was weird. But anyways, let's just get into it. The books that I actually finished, I read 1,619 pages, but if I include the pages of the books that I DNF'd, then it's more around 1,900 or so. So overall, it turned out to be a pretty average reading month for me, but again, literally most of those pages came from the last 2 days of the month. So I'll start with my DNFs because I literally always forget to talk about those until after I finished filming, and then I'm like, fuck, I forgot again. So we'll just start there today. So one of the books that I DNF'd was Kingdom of Souls by Rena Barron. This one was a buddy read with Roxanne over at Roxanne Can Read. She asked me to read it with her because she was trying to read it and could not wrap her head around what was going on. So I read it with her, and I too could not wrap my head around what was going on at all. It was so confusing. I loved the world and the magic system. I thought it was really interesting, and I wish that I could have gotten more into it, but the plot just was not clicking in my brain for some reason, and I hated the main character as well. I did not like her whatsoever. I found her to be very annoying and childish. And I know it's a YA novel, she's meant to be, this teenager, I get that, but as an adult reader, I struggle with immature characters, which I know is a me problem. I'm not blaming the author or the character even. It's just a personal preference. I just really don't like when characters are kind of very self-centered and just kind of assuming that they know better than the adults around them. She kind of had this thought process of she could do better than people whose literal job it is to solve these problems, but her, the inexperienced teenager, somehow knows better than all of the adults combined, because that makes sense. So it's just that kind of thing that just really bothers me, and I don't and I just have a hard time sympathizing with her when she gets herself into trouble as a result of these things. And then just the plot was so confusing. If y'all could see me and Roxanne's DMs together just trying to piece together the plot of this, we were both on completely different pages. We'd both read a section and then kind of recap to each other what we just read, and both of us had completely different thoughts on what just happened in that chapter. Neither of us had a damn clue what was going on in that book. So we thought it was just best to just DNF it rather than just push through and end up giving it a bad rating, because I personally don't rate books that I DNF. But I did get about halfway through, and I could not do it. I could not deal with it. But the magic system is gorgeous, so if you are somebody who likes really complicated plots, you might love this. Just was personally not for me. So I also DNF'd These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong. Unfortunately, I was really enjoying it. I loved the writing, the plot, the characters were really fun. I was loving everything about it, but I personally have really bad anxiety when it comes to gore and body horror, and bugs as well. And this book had very graphic descriptions of all 3 of those, and I couldn't deal with it. My anxiety was too bad, so unfortunately I had to DNF it. It is not by any means a bad book, and I want people to read this book because the bit that I read was incredible. I just couldn't get through it. So I think I got about 20% of the way through that one before they started talking about some guy. I'm not gonna go into details actually, but it was gross and I couldn't deal with it. Body horror and bugs are 2 things that I cannot deal with, and this was bugs inside of body horror. It was just the absolute worst possible thing for my anxiety, so unfortunately a DNF for me, but I'm very sad about it. I wish that I could finish this book and just really enjoy this world because it was beautiful. I also unfortunately DNF'd my arc of Iron Widow by Xiran that I got from NetGalley, which I am also so sad about. I'm not sure what happened with this one. It just really wasn't vibing with me. I didn't get that far into it, but just the whole vibe was completely off for me. The premise is so cool. It's described as Pacific Rim meets a retelling of China's only female emperor, which sounds so fucking cool. And it's about badass women being pilots in these giant robot things. Like, yes, please. But it sounded amazing and right up my alley, but I was reading it and I got a little bit into it and I just could not vibe. I knew by page 3 that I was not gonna like this, but I tried to push through because it was an arc and I was trying to give like a thorough review for the arc and I just couldn't do it. I think I got maybe like 80 pages in or so and I just called it quits because again, if I pushed through, it was going to be a bad review. So like not only was I going to spend time reading a book that I didn't enjoy, but I was also going to give it a bad review. It was just better for me to DNF at that point in time. But I'm really sad about it. I hope that other people love it because it does seem like a genuinely fantastic book. It's just something about it just didn't vibe with me and I really don't know what it was because like the writing style was fine, the characters were fine, it just didn't work for me. Okay, on to the books that I actually finished, starting with Ghosts of the Shadow Market by Cassandra Clare. This is a book of short stories that I for some reason thought was about Kit from the Dark Artifices series. I don't know why I thought it was following him and like his childhood growing up in the shadow markets, but it is not about him. It is actually about my boy Jem Carstairs, who is like one of the best characters to ever grace this planet. Thank you, Cassandra Clare. I was so pleasantly surprised by that. Like there are also other characters in this one, but it's all about Jem kind of spending a couple centuries going through the shadow markets and he just ends up on this mission trying to find the lost Herondale. But basically it's just kind of the in-between of, you know, like where Jem and Tessa were between the ending of the Infernal Devices and, you know, kind of modern day. So I loved this so much. It was unexpected. I was very much dreading going into this one. Because again, I didn't think that it was going to be about these characters. And like these are my favorite characters in this entire Shadowhunter world. So like getting to read about them and like just see where they were and like kind of get backstory and context for their lives over centuries was just so wonderful. And we had so many like tender moments between Jem and Tessa as well as like Jem and other characters, some things with Jem and Will, and like everything was just so good. And I loved it so much. The first half was definitely a lot stronger than the second half. I stopped carrying them closer to modern day we got, to be honest, because like Jace started coming in there and Clary and characters who I just care a lot less about. So I didn't care as much about the later half of the book, but the first half was just so freaking good. I loved every second of the first half of this book. I would probably actually reread a lot of these stories too, which is saying a lot. But yeah, just overall this was surprisingly fantastic and I gave it 4 stars. After that, I read The Sound of Stars by Alechia Dow. This was the book pick for the Queer Joy Book Club for July, which if you missed it, I had the absolute pleasure of co-hosting the live show this month and it was so much fun. I will leave that link down below for you if you want to check it out. But this one is a YA sci-fi about an alien invasion. The aliens have banned any kind of human emotional expression, so any kind of art, music, books, all of it is all completely illegal and the punishment is death. But our main character, she wants to help people as best she can, so she secretly runs a illegal library out of her basement where she lends books out to people in her building who are just desperate for some kind of release, some kind of coping mechanism, so she helps them even though it's putting her life on the line. But she gets found out by one of the aliens and she thinks it's certain death. But it turns out that this alien actually really loves pop music and he kind of fell in love with the art on Earth when he got here. And the two of them kind of start working together to solve the alien invasion that he's part of. So it was a really interesting book. There's also a romance in here. Both main characters are on the asexual spectrum, which was just wonderful to see. And so it's just this like road trip story at the end of the world between these two very unlikely people who are slowly falling in love and learning how to find joy again after years of being told that they're not allowed to feel joy. So I just adored this book. I thought it was such a fun time. It dealt with some very serious topics, violence and freedom, as well as like racial discrimination and like very serious topics. But there were also moments of silliness and just these characters getting to kind of experience life and be young teenagers and have moments where they could just live, and it was just so beautiful to see, and I really enjoyed this book so much. I definitely recommend it. It did not get nearly enough hype. I think this is also a debut book as well, which was just like mind-blowing because it was so good. But yeah, so I loved this one and I also gave it 4 stars. And then this brings us to the last 3 days of the month where I just read a book a day for like 3 days because I just was all of a sudden on a reading kick and I was just really in the mood for some audiobook novellas, so that's what I did for like 3 days. The first of those that I read is A Song for the Wild Bill by Becky Chambers. This is her newest release, and y'all, oh my god, this book, you know, sometimes you just read a book, right, and like you just get this feeling that the author gets you on like some soul deep level. I didn't know that I needed to be seen this way until Becky Chambers saw me this clearly. Me and the main character just clicked so well. I just understood their entire character instantly, and it was just such a wonderful experience. This book went right to my favorite shelf. I should probably give you a synopsis. That would be a good idea before I get carried away with just gushing about it. But this is the first book in the Monk and Robot series. It takes place in a futuristic sci-fi world. Pretty sure they were all like living on the moon or something like that, but they live in a world where they essentially had like robot servants until the robots gained sentience and decided that they didn't want to work for humans. They wanted to go and live their own life and be free. And Becky Chambers, if you don't know, writes optimistic sci-fi. So she writes sci-fi where, like, you know, the world doesn't end in some fiery pit of destruction, and it's instead very optimistic and cozy. So when the robots wanted to have their own kind of freedom, the humans just said, okay, sure. So they took half the moon for themselves, and the other half of the moon was left to the wilderness for the robots to go and have their own life, where they would be completely undisturbed, and the humans swore that they would not make contact with them unless the robots reached out first. And that's just kind of how things have existed for the last, I think it was 200 years. So that's kind of the premise of the world. But the main character is a monk, and they're just, for some reason, just unhappy with life. So they decide to take up becoming a traveling tea monk, where they just travel around and, you know, set up shop for weary people to come and have a cup of tea and tell them their woes and just feel better for a little while. And they love that job so much, but once again they get this feeling that just something's not right in their life. They're just not happy. They can't figure out why, because they have everything, but they're just not happy for some reason. So they go off in search of some kind of greater purpose, some kind of just something that will make them happy, and they end up going off into the wilderness, and that's where they meet our other main character, who is a robot. And this is the first human robot encounter in hundreds of years. And it was just such a sweet story, because they just become this like unlikely pair, and they go waltzing off into the wilderness together, and they're just getting to know each other along the way, and it was just so wonderful. There was so much packed into this tiny little book, and I loved every single second of it. It was just incredible, and I can't recommend it enough. This one is a new release. It was just released I think a couple of weeks ago, so it's like brand new. I know lots of people had it on their TBRs, but I need you to read it. To like just stop what you're doing and pick it up and read it right now, please. And I obviously gave this one a full 5 stars, no questions, right to my favorite shelf. I loved it. After that one, I picked up A Dowry of Blood by T.S. Gibson. This was unexpected. So this one is a retelling of Dracula and his brides. It is queer, polyamorous, and just deliciously gothic. It was so beautiful, but it's written from the perspective of the first wife, Constanza. She's kind of writing an open letter to Dracula after he's gone. And it's basically just her telling him kind of all the ways that she loved him, but also how over the centuries he turned into this horrible monster, and she and their partners grew to hate him so much, and how he made their lives so rich but also so miserable at the same time. But it was stunning. It was so beautifully written. This author's writing style is just unbelievably good. It was just so beautiful, and also unexpectedly steamy. I fully forgot that this book was for adult audiences. I thought it was YA going into it. It is not. It was very steamy and very well written. I don't care how old I get, vampires will always be hot, and this one was no exception. There was one part of the description that, like, if this does not make you want to read it, I don't know what will, but it says that it's a queer reimagining of Dracula's brides, featuring sapphic yearning at the opera and tangled polyamorous relationships. Like, if that doesn't make you want to read this, literally nothing will. Like, this was just so good. I really can't get over how much I love this book. I gave it 4.5 stars. It was almost perfect. I just wish that it was a tiny bit longer, just so we could kind of get to know some of the, like, later characters. Their fourth partner, Alechia, he doesn't come in until over halfway through, so I felt like we didn't quite get to know him as well as the other characters in the book, and I would have liked to know him just a little bit more, but otherwise this was just phenomenal. And then the last book that I read this month was The Miserable Mill by Lemony Snicket, which is the 4th book in the series series of Unfortunate Events series. This is part of my children's catch-up project that I've been very, very slowly working on for the last couple of years. I didn't read any of the like classic children's books growing up. I went right from picture books pretty much to YA, and I was definitely too young to be reading some of the things that I read when I was younger, but we're just gonna ignore that fact. But as a result of this, I missed all of those like really popular children's series, like series of Unfortunate Events and the Chronicles of Narnia and Percy Jackson, and like all these series that so many people read as kids, but I never did, so I want to read them now. So I started this a couple of years ago, and basically I just pick one up whenever I am bored and in the mood to read, but I'm not sure what else I want to read, but like I want something really quick and easy, so I read one of these books. And so here we are. So I don't think I need to go into a synopsis of the series. It's pretty well loved, but just in case, the like bare bones basics, instead it follows the Baudelaire children who are recently orphaned, and they're just kind of being passed around from guardian to guardian until the eldest comes of age and can inherit their fortune. But the villain, Count Olaf, desperately wants their fortune as well, so he's kind of hunting them down and making their lives absolutely fucking miserable, trying to take the fortune for himself for some reason. I don't know why that's his life's mission, is to steal these children's fortune, but it is. So I've loved this series so far. This book though I did not really enjoy. I like this series because of how ridiculous it is. Like it's just so stupid, but like still believable to a degree, and it's just very whimsical and fun in a very dark way, obviously. But this book was just a little bit too ridiculous. There was literally a point in this book where the infant Sunny was having a sword fight with somebody who was using an actual sword, and she was blocking them with her teeth. Like like it just passed the point of like the believable kind of ridiculous into just utter disbelief. Like it was just dumb. So I didn't like this one nearly as much, but I'm still going to carry on with the series. They're great little palette cleansers, but this one I gave 2 stars. And that is it for the month of July. Those are all the books that I read this month. I seem to be on a bit more of a reading kick now. It's only August 1st right now, but I'm already halfway through my first book on my August TBR, so far so good there. But thank you all so much for watching. I hope you're having a fantastic day wherever you are in the world, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye!